welcome Robin Kaye to the podium. Robin Kaye, Friends of Lanai.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you for all the work you've done in putting this together. I'd like to thank the Democratic Party Environmental Caucus for this series. It's a wonderful idea and a great opportunity. And mostly I'd like to thank all of you for coming to listen to a neighbor island perspective. We're delighted that you're here tonight. The Lingle-Murdoch industrial wind power plants planned for the islands of Lanai and Molokai to support Oahu's energy demand does all of us an injustice. It is an unnecessary financial, environmental, and community disaster. It is absolutely the wrong answer to the right question. How do we get Hawaii off its reliance on fossil fuel? My name is Robin Kaye, and I'm the spokesperson for Friends of Lanai. Friends of Lanai speaks for the many Hawaii residents, ratepayers, taxpayers, and visitors who oppose the Big Wind project. But in particular, we are vocal advocates for the many Lanai residents who, because they rent from or work for, or their families rent from or work for Castle and Cooke, cannot speak out. Friends of Lanai is fully in support of decreasing Hawaii's dependence on fossil fuels. We are fully and totally supportive of alternative renewable energy. We are not, however, supportive of an estimated $3 billion project for which tax and ratepayers would be responsible for 2/3 of the costs with tax credits, tax-based grants, tax-based loans, rate surcharges, and rate increases. We would much prefer that the $1 billion for the cable, for example, be applied to cover, as it could, every household on Oahu with solar hot water, or 1/5 of the households on Oahu with photovoltaics. We are not supportive of taking 1/4 of Lanai to provide 6 to 8% of Oahu's never-ending demand for electricity. We think that Lanai, rather than being an industrial wind power plant for Oahu, could instead become a world-class model of energy self-sufficiency. We have only 3,000 residents, 98% of whom live in one centralized, walkable town. We have a very small grid, 5 megawatts, compared to Oahu's grid of approximately 1,400 megawatts. We in Lanai are surrounded by ocean waves, good wind, thousands of acres of unused agricultural lands, and lots of sunshine. We could not only get our island off of its use of fossil fuel, but in doing so, we could become a training ground for those employees that will be needed to do this around the world, and in the process become a world-class model of energy self-sufficiency. Recently, on Dan Boylan's Island Insights show, Walter Riddy of Molokai illustrated why he and many other neighbor islanders find this project so offensive. Walter went to a meeting in downtown Honolulu and needed to use the bathroom before the meeting. On his way into the building, the door opened with electricity. In the bathroom, the toilet flushed with electricity. The water in the sink turned on and off with electricity. The paper towels came out with electricity. It would be educational to determine what Walter's use of the bathroom cost us, you and me, over the course of a day or a year. It is important to understand a bit about Lanai to understand the Friends of Lanai's position. 98% of our island has been owned by one man since the middle of the 19th century, when Walter Murray Gibson consolidated ownership under the auspices of the Mormon Church, but then, when excommunicated, kept title within his family. The current owner of Lanai, since 1985, is an 88-year-old mainland real estate developer. There are approximately 1,500 homes on Lanai, but 500 of those are owned by David Murdoch. Every business but one operates in a facility that David Murdoch owns. He is by far the largest single employer on the island, with a direct workforce of about 150 and several hundred other workers who work under management contract with Four Seasons. In 2006, Mr. Murdoch decided to develop a 400-megawatt wind power plant on Lanai, envisioning tremendous revenue in selling that wind to Oahu via an undersea cable, which, by the way, he intended to both build, own, and charge the state to operate. His timing was perfect. On January 31st, 2008, former Governor Lingle launched the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. 6 months later, unhappy with the pace of permitting, Murdoch made the front page of the Advertiser by asking Governor Lingle to declare, quote, an energy emergency, end quote. On what did he base this request? The cost of gasoline. Quote, We are in a desperate emergency in the state of Hawaii. You're paying now over $100 to fill your car up. It goes to $200, $300. When's it going to stop? Never. This sleight of hand disinformation has often been repeated since then. The statement that Hawaii is 95% dependent on fossil fuel fails to draw the distinction between the 30% that is used for generating electricity and the whopping 65% that goes for transportation. Neither the governor nor the legislature at that time agreed that his remarks constituted an emergency, and his attempt to bypass the state's environmental regulations and permitting process resulted only in shortening the maximum time allotted for permitting review of environmental projects through the passage of Act 207. Then along came the established wind developer First Wind, a corporation that wanted to compete by offering to build 400 megawatts of power on Molokai. Anticipating a lengthy litigation, DBED staff made HECO, First Wind, and Castle & Cook agree to play nice. So Castle & Cook got 200 megawatts, First Wind got 200 megawatts, and if one failed to perform, the other could ramp up to 350 megawatts. At least that's what we were told, because that agreement has never been made public. But as you know, First Wind failed to meet the agreement's requirements, and it looked for a while as if Lanai would again be targeted for all 400 megawatts. Just last week, however, the Public Utilities Commission decided to reopen the competitive bidding process for 200 of those megawatts for, and this is important to remember, for any renewable resource from any site that could reasonably serve Oahu's electricity demands. Last year, DBED decided that they would begin the required review process with a programmatic EIS, as Alan so carefully said, saying that this mostly mainland model would consider and detail a macro view of the inter-island wind project, but would refuse to make assumptions as to specific projects. It would, we were told, in 4 scoping meetings held on 4 islands, establish best management practices for the project-specific EISs. To everyone's great surprise and outrage, this programmatic EIS was to be based, as they wrote in their preliminary notice, on either big wind or no big wind. So I'm delighted that Alan said today that they're going to change that and include a number of other renewables. Further, this process allowed for no questions to be answered at those sessions. No questions to be answered at those sessions. The impacted communities were told that their questions would have to await the project-specific EIS, which would in effect mean that no answers would be forthcoming for at least 3 years. That recent PUC ruling that I mentioned before, by the way, now calls into question in our minds the very validity of the joint state-federal programmatic EIS process. Since that process was directed at evaluating only big wind, although that's now changed, but also only examining big wind in Maui County, as Alan's slide showed, but the PUC process opens it up to the possibility, if a reasonable way could be reached, for the Big Island to participate. It's wonderful to see the PUC opening this process up. They've agreed to allow Life of the Land and Maui County to participate in a docket that has HECO requesting $4 million from ratepayers for their big wind studies. And they have, as I said before, disallowed HECO and Castle & Cook's, quote, giving, end quote, 200 megawatts to Pattern Energy, a totally new player to this deal. Another egregious example of the opacity of this project was seen during the past legislative session on both the House floor and in the Senate's informational briefing, which happened, by the way, thank you to Senator Gabbard and Senator Baker's agreement. Booz Allen prepared a study for the National Renewable Energy Lab that included significant financial analysis of big wind. When we asked DBED for a copy of that, we were refused. When our attorney requested it, it was delivered, but with every number blacked out. That entire report was referenced by Senator Baker in the informational briefing and later held up on the House floor by Representative Thielen. It was as much redacted as any CIA report might have been. The Department of Energy representative at that meeting assured Senator Baker that the study would be released by the end of February. It's now July, and we've still not seen that report. In 2008, Castle & Cook published a preliminary notice environmental impact statement outlining how the corporation envisioned their project on Lanai. And here are some of the things they said. On your way in or out, look at the model in the back of our island. 1/4 of Lanai, 22,000 of the 89,000 acres, was to be dedicated to the establishment of an industrial wind power plant for Oahu. These are not numbers we've made up. These are numbers in the Castle & Cook 2008 Environmental Impact Statement. Approximately 170 turbines would be placed on those 22,000 acres, which are, by the way, the best hunting grounds on the island of Lanai, rich with venison and mouflon. Over 2,500 Hawaii residents visit Lanai annually to hunt and fill their refrigerators, while in the process depositing over $2 million in the local economy for food, transportation, and housing. The area is also rich with cultural resources and is a significant part of Lanai's native Hawaiian history. In a very recent ethnography of the Ka'ahupua'a, which is the area targeted for the wind power plant, known to many people as the Garden of the Gods, over 110 cultural sites were documented, including burials, residences, heiaus, and trails. A rich historic legacy. Each turbine that would be placed on that island would be as tall as the first Hawaiian bank building in downtown Honolulu, the tallest building in the state. Each of the turbine's wings would be as big as if a Boeing 747 were placed on top of that building. The area proposed for the development is the documented flight path of the endangered Hawaiian petrel, the Oahu, and Lanai is now known to be a major nesting ground for those endangered birds. Ka'a is also home to 2 additional endangered species, the turtle and the monk seal. Because the state was uncomfortable with one private developer owning not only the industrial power plant, but the delivery system as well, it was initially proposed that the state would own and operate the cable. The recent growth of the state's deficit quickly ended that notion. And the latest scheme is to now find a private developer that would build, operate, and for some undefined period of time, own the cable before turning it over to HECO. This is the meat of the controversial Senate Bill 367, written by DBED, HECO, and consultant Navigant Corporation, that stalled in conference committee this session. Many legislators that we spoke with were very uncomfortable with passing this ultimate but unknown costs of the cable onto ratepayers through rate increases, rate adjustments, and rate surcharges. Over 100 individuals testified that this effort to establish a regulatory system for the cable was premature. No EIS had been completed. No one even knew where the cables would eventually go. We know that the Navigant report, published in April of 2011, projected the costs of the cable to HECO's residential ratepayers to be between $3.50 and $5.13 per household per month, just for the cable. I didn't make that up either. That's in the Navigant report. Now add that to the recently announced $3.31 a month rate increase just awarded by the PUC to HECO, and Oahu's electric rates are now approaching those of Lanai, which is what we think is meant by levelizing rates. There's so much more to this story, but given the brevity of my assigned time, let me tell you a little bit about the current situation on Lanai. Over the 35 plus years that I've lived on and off this island, we have always prided ourselves in community value. The results of a recent survey indicated that 90% of the residents of this community said that the most important thing about Lanai was, quote, its community and the people, end quote. And a close second was, quote, the Lanai lifestyle. We have a community where everyone knows one another, where homes are mostly left unlocked, where children roam town freely and without fear of strangers because there really aren't any. But we have recently been upended with threats and intimidation. We are being torn apart by this discussion. Please come to Lanai. Walk around the city. You will see many, many no windmills on Lanai signs around town. You will also see many of the ILWU's mislabeled signs saying, quote, keep Lanai green, support the wind farm. Remember, none of this wind is for Lanai. Honolulu gets all of it. Big wind does not keep or make Lanai green. And as HECO has consistently said, big wind is not an employment generator, given that it has the potential of perhaps 15 to 20 permanent jobs. This in light of the fact that Castle & Cooke has, over the last 2.5 years, laid off over 50% of its non-hotel employees. This discussion is hard for Lanai people because they have fear of retaliation from Castle & Cooke and now from the union as well. Just this past week, 3 individuals handed me generous donations, but asked me to remain anonymous for fear of retribution. But many who are silenced are fundamentally and unalterably opposed to this wind power plant on Oahu. We question our state government's misdirected focus on the 30% of fossil fuel use, electricity, instead of the 65% for transportation. We question our state government's rush to wind, contrary to their claims of being agnostic on which renewable energy path to walk, as illustrated by their previously ignoring any other alternative energy source in the programmatic EIS. And we question the need to take 1/4 of Lanai, a rural, quiet, safe neighbor island, and turn it into another Campbell Industrial Park for Oahu. I leave you with a question. If the federal government's current budget negotiations were to result in the elimination of the 35% tax incentives for the wind developer, would this project to go green continue? Thank you.